Hi, this is Dr. Parikh, and we're looking at the final literature review paper. So I like to look at things where they fall on the Blackboard page. So here under literature review, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll notice a couple things. First is there's a literature review tutoring reflection. So you need to go to tutoring for your literature review paper. It doesn't need to be your final paper. You could do it a step or two before that, but sometime between that early paraphrasing and now, I want to see you go to the Writing Center or an online tutor again. Then there's the final literature review paper. It's worth 100 points, which is 10% of your final grade. So in one sense, it's not enough to sink you if you don't do well on it. But for this class, that's a lot of points. Most of the assignments are small 10 to 30 point assignments. So it's kind of a mix. And you can see there's a link to the templates. There's a link to the peer review form. As always, you're going to be uploading a document, either a Word document or a PDF, and then you can also include a link to your Google Doc if you want me to comment in there. So we still have, so under the templates, it's this same template that you've been working on since the title page. Let me make it a little smaller so it fits on the screen. So you should have a working document that you've added things to over time. And make sure that you go through and check to see if any of the formatting has changed. Again, I think you should keep these templates and use them. If your template gets messed up, download a new copy. But you also need to understand the rules of APA style so that you can double check them. So here it is. And again, there may be updates to APA style with the new edition coming out. If they're small, I'm certainly going to update my rubrics and templates and things, but I may not update the video for small minor changes. So like if the headings change, I'm probably not going to update the video, the entire course, because it's really frustrating because I'm recording this video like 2 months before the new one comes out. So I just redid my whole course. As you go through, you will need to add in your overview paragraphs. That's not a specific step so far. It's just something you do as you prep for your final draft. So when you submit for peer review, you hopefully will have it in so that somebody's looking at it. And it's also a step you can do before you go in for tutoring, so that somebody looks at it. Your abstract, this I do want to be in a certain word range. The paper as a whole I'm pretty flexible about, but in the real world, abstracts in particular often do have real requirements. So like if you're submitting an abstract for a conference or for a journal publication, they have real limits. And if you're if you're so short, they're probably going to dismiss you as not having high quality work. And if you go over their limits, they may not consider you. Often places have a 150 word limit. Sometimes it'll be 300 or 350. I follow the guideline, the general suggestion that's in the APA manual, which is between 150 and 250 words. And make sure you look through and see, I talk through exactly what needs to go in. For your literature review, you're really focusing on your main points, those main take-homes. Keywords, you can pick whatever you want. When you do your PsycInfo searches, you'll see there are keywords listed. Really, you want to think, what would somebody Google? They're like hashtags or search terms. And they're left over from the old days when there would actually be everything was printed, and there would be indexes that would have all of these keywords. So if you looked up the keyword you wanted, they would tell you which articles that had been published in the time frame for the index, which articles you could look up that were that were tagged with those keywords. So be very grateful to live in the day and age that you live in, rather than having to go look up indexes. You'll also add in a roadmap paragraphs. You'll have a sentence to gather interest, 1 or 2 sentences, and then 1 or 2 sentences to you want to make sure you have a clear thesis, and you want to ask somebody, your roommate, a friend, a family member, your peer reviewer, your tutor, ask somebody if they can pick out what your thesis is. And if they pick the wrong sentence, think about how you can make the thesis stand out more clearly. And then you want a sentence or 2 that kind of hints at what's going to come up in the main themes. Remember, you're not writing a murder mystery. You are writing a literature review. And so you want to be very upfront about what your main points are, just like a lawyer has an opening argument where they kind of preview what they're planning to argue. And then they go in depth to show and document how they got to that point. Then you'll have a heading that actually says literature review. For your research proposal, that'll get changed to introduction, but for now it says literature review. And here's your background paragraph. That's what you've outlined in your literature review themes outline. You'll take your headings, and so rather than theme 1 entitled case, you'll put in your heading, and then you'll have the paragraphs developed from your outline. Theme 2 entitled case, and the paragraphs you developed. Keep in mind, I'm going to be, if I gave you formative feedback, so I said this needs to be changed, even in the rubrics, if I said, this isn't right, you're not citing enough things, this isn't clear. If I've given you feedback on an outline, I expect to see some of those things changed here. You don't get to resubmit your outline for higher points, but the idea is that the feedback I give you on your outline helps you submit a better paper and get higher points when it counts. That's why the literature review final paper is worth so much more than any one outline, because you've had a chance, I want to give you a good chance to fix mistakes. And I expect at least 2 paragraphs, at least 2 citations from different articles in each paragraph, and at least 3 citations in each theme. And that 4th broad article should help with that. Discussion. You'll add in another overview paragraph here where you're going to, again, summarize the main idea of your argument. It feels silly in a paper this long, and sometimes Writing Center tutors or online tutors will say it's repetitive. You want to vary the language that you use. You want to say things in a slightly different way, but you are making the same points, because when you get to, if this paper, if you had a 25-page literature review paper, which is what something that would be published might look like, you are going to need to remind the reader of what the main points were. And even when you do your research proposal, you'll have these extra sections, the method and results section. And so it'll make more sense to have this, okay, where did we start paragraph. Then you'll have limitations in future research, and you'll talk about your professional applications. So again, here, these are things you've already, figured out, planned out in your outline. You've got some sentences to work with. As you go from an outline to a draft, you expect that you're going to be adding in some sentences to smoothen things out, to kind of make everything flow. You may even add a few more citations than you had in your outline. Your outline was really a bare bones. Like, what is the minimum I need to make a paper that sort of makes sense? As you transition into your draft, this is the foundation. It's going to be the easiest draft you've ever written, because you already know what you plan to say, and you've already written a good bit of it. Some of it you're taking straight from your article notes. And also expect to still do some work as you go. When students check out early, their later papers tend to drop in points. And then conclusions. This is another overview paragraph that you're going to need to write. And this one is where you're really focused on, okay, this is my last chance to make an impression on the reader. If they remember 1 or 2 main ideas, what will it be? And then you'll include your references, and again, make sure that the formatting has all stayed correct. This is another place where the APA style might change, so just be aware of that as you go. Make sure that you check the rubric. You can even grade yourself, or you could even trade papers with a peer and grade each other using the rubric. You'll notice most of these things are worth not very many points, just 1.5 points. Let's see, what's the most I can find? 3 points for having citations. Most of the issues, 5 points. What are some of the 5-point ones? So this is, the 5-point ones tend to be more about the organization. So do you have topic sentences? Are you arguing towards something? Again, think of that lawyer in court. Do you have a point that you're moving toward, rather than just kind of throwing up throwing up citations on the paper? Are you going beyond? So are you actually making points beyond what you're paraphrasing from other people? And that often comes in your topic sentences and in your linking words. So make sure that you're using linking words like therefore, or in contrast, or in addition, or another study, blah, blah, blah. Use these small transition words to help the reader understand how you mean these ideas to relate to each other. And then having writing that's free from bias. So there's a couple ways that comes in. One is writing following the guidelines from APA, so making sure that you are avoiding gender bias, racial bias, age bias, things like that. But it's also making sure that you are not making claims without support, without citations. This is the one that can get tricky if you know a lot. For example, if you're writing about autism spectrum disorders and you have a cousin with an autism spectrum disorder, you may just kind of have some knowledge you've developed as being part of that family. Similarly, if you're writing about a disorder that you have personal experiences. You also have had a lot of things that doctors and counselors have told you over time. However, in this paper, you can only use information that you can cite. So if you're using claims that you're just kind of saying is common knowledge, so for example, kids who come from divorced homes have a hard time. That's not actually a scientific claim unless you have a citation for it. And when you say things like kids from divorced homes, or even worse, kids from broken homes, don't use pay attention to the language you're using and the messages you're sending. So kids from divorced homes or from divorced parents, whatever, you're implying all kids from all divorced parents always have a hard time when you say it like that. So adding words like may, should, or not should, may, often, could, can, sometimes, occasionally, so you can have different variations. You can say often or generally if that's what your article is suggesting. So biased writing falls into a couple different categories. And down here we have some more high points. So using quotes correctly and not using more than 3. And again, most of my good papers end up not having any because for the outline you weren't allowed to use them. And so by the time you get to this, to writing your draft, typically students are like, well, I've already figured out what I want to say. I don't need the quotes and references. So there may be minor changes in the rubric over time. I'm not going to update the video for small changes, but what I want you to notice is I want you to look carefully at the rubric, look at the different levels and kind of see what the penalties are. One thing you may notice is that early on, sometimes I'll have a very, this column might still be 90% of the credit on an assignment. Here, it's only 75% of the credit. This column might be 50% on a really early assignment when I'm just trying to give you feedback, but I don't want to hurt your grade yet. But by this time, it's worth 25% because you've had a lot of chances to fix most of these mistakes and you know what your resources are at this point. So that's the final paper. It should be polished at this point. You should have gone through it a few times, use the kinds of strategies that Sukhman talks about. And in the next video, I'll talk about the kind of feedback to expect on your paper. Thanks.